So I'm assuming, is that a thumbs up? Let's go ahead.
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
It's a little chaotic here in person, but
I'm thinking that. So I'll just start speaking, and maybe as people hear my voice, they'll be like, oh, who's calling me to the sanctuary? Can it be that we are starting this workshop? Welcome, welcome, welcome back to our wonderful Olympia UU Covenanting Workshop. If you were not here earlier, I am the Reverend Summer Albayati, she, her pronouns, and I am joined in the sanctuary by the Reverend Carol McKinley. Reverend Carol, are you there?
Do you hear me, Summer?
I hear you. Yay. Yay. So hopefully both of our voices will bring people into the sanctuary.
So just so you know, Reverend Summer, there's a little bit of transition time back and forth between playing your voice out loud to the sanctuary and playing their voices through to Zoom. So it doesn't work for quick back and forth.
It's not quick, but it doesn't work for the way I chit chat with people, is what you're saying.
Unfortunately not.
I'm like fast. I'm fast. Okay. Well, I apologize for that. I will do my best to wait for that lull. So I'm going to try this again. Reverend Carol, are we ready to begin in the sanctuary?
Ready in the sanctuary.
Parfait, perfect. That is wonderful. All right. So welcome, welcome, welcome once again. It is good to be with all of you, and we are excited to provide you with a covenanting workshop, knowing that this is going to be the beginning. You've already been doing a lot of wonderful work, as I have been told by Reverend Mary. So excited that you all have been really looking at this covenanting. And so now we're going to go a little deeper, hopefully, today, to bring you to the promised land of a wonderful covenant. So on the next slide, I want to invite those of you who are online, if you haven't done so already, to rename yourself. You already heard how to kind of do that, hovering over your photo until you see those three little dots. And if you haven't already, and if it's comfortable to do so, if you could place your pronouns next to your name, that is really helpful. So as you see, I have Reverend Summer Albayati, she, her pronouns, she, her, he, him, they, them, or any combination would be great. Thank you for doing that. And I hear that name tags already have pronouns, so we're good there. Wonderful. So Reverend Carol, I will hand over the next slide to you.
We come together. We want to take a just brief look at our agenda, which of course we've already been welcomed, and an introduction. We'll have just a moment about our covenant as we come together, and then pause for a centering moment from Reverend Summer. And then we'll be reminded of what we want to hold as we are here together, and also then how that relates to the mission of this congregation. Again, having time for you all to reflect. And then you'll receive your instructions, and we'll go into small groups. And online, those small groups will be broken automatically by the process we have. And we have a number of questions for those small groups and those here gathered to look at. And then at the end time of that, we'll ring a bell or a bowl and have you come back in here for some final words and thank yous as we conclude today's process. So we want to move to how are we as we come together. The next slide. Being together and these understandings of how we are together. be welcoming and inclusive, listen deeply to each other, share the space, share the microphone if you're online or together in a small group, and then finally express your gratitude, your thanks to each other. When you break into your small groups, if you have additional suggestions for being together, you may suggest those. And now, Reverend Summer, bring to a centering moment.
Thank you, Reverend Carol. We have just worshiped together and then maybe had some coffee and cookies and some good conversation. I know here on Zoom, in Zoomland, there was some conversing going on. So I wanted to bring us back to what this moment calls us to do. I invite you to bring your collective lights together. Maybe take a few breaths. Close your eyes or soften your gaze. Feel your body. Feel your body in your seat, maybe your feet touching the ground. And with each breath, sink down a little bit more into a relaxed space. Pay attention to where you need to breathe into your body. What could use a little more love inside of you right now? Do you have an ache in your shoulders or an aching in your heart? I invite you to turn towards what is needed inside of you right now and provide it with some healing breath. As we do this work together today, remember that you can always return to your breath. You can always return to that healing. There may be moments when you need to do that. And I want to invite you to remember when you need to take some breaths and center yourself back down. When you are ready, I invite you to open your eyes and take a look around and get centered back into sacred space together.
As we continue with this work, as you center yourselves, hold these points before you as we meet in our small groups. First of all, a covenant will describe how we want to be together in this particular ministry, in this congregation. It is all about relationship. A covenant is connected to the mission of this congregation and the mission of our ministry together. Covenant wants to use a multicultural, dismantling white supremacy culture lens when creating a covenant. It's critical that we remember that covenants will be broken. How will we hold each other accountable and bring each other back into covenant. And finally, covenants are living documents. They are meant to be changed as we grow and evolve. And next, how is that tied to our mission as a congregation here at OUUC?
Yes, how is it tied, connected to mission? Remember that covenant is always connected to mission. And so let us look at your mission that we heard spoken earlier in the worship service. The mission of Olympia UU, our spiritual principles. Our spiritual principles affirm the worth and dignity of every person, and that we are a part of the infinite, interdependent web of life. We welcome and wonder, embrace and empower, bridge and become. As we do this work today, beloveds, I want you to reflect on how will we be together as we do this sacred work. How do you embody the mission of this congregation? Let us take a moment in silence to reflect on these two questions.
And now we will begin the major portion of this workshop, which is the gathering in our small groups. Those of you here in the sanctuary were given a number when you entered. That is the group number you will join when instructed. For those on Zoom, you'll be assigned a group to work with online. When instructed, you will join that group. And facilitators, which we have several of here in the congregation and those online, the facilitators will guide you and take notes on what you create together. Once you're in your group, the facilitator will read the question aloud. Take some moments, 2 to 3 minutes, to silently reflect, then discuss that question. Synthesize in your group the points made, looking for common elements. And your facilitator will put the points on either a flip chart, or if you're online, on Google Doc, Jamboard, or perhaps the facilitator will take them by hand. So after each question, repeat that process, reading the question aloud and then going through that contemplation period and reflection, and then discuss the question. And now here are the questions that you'll be discussing. And your facilitator will have copies of these as well.
So you see there is the group process. I have also placed it in the chat. And the facilitators should also have this at their ready as they facilitate. And in our next slide, we have the questions that we will also place in the chat for those online. So these are the questions we want you to discuss in your groups. These are the questions that will be read aloud and that you will contemplate and then synthesize what you all discuss. Why is covenant so important to how we relate to our world? How does the concept of interdependence guide us in our own actions and relationships to each other and the world? Why is the practice of covenant important for you? How does the practice of covenant relate to our work in anti-racism, anti-oppression, multiculturalism? And finally, how will we call one another back into covenant?
Reverend Summer.
Yes.
We'll now go to our groups, and as I say, those numbers you held will indicate the group. The facilitator for that group, if you'll hold like 1, 2, 3, 4, and go to your location. Do you want to do that?
Actually, if I could.
Okay.
I think we have enough people here for 3 groups of good size. And so 1 will be here with Eric, 2 back there with Arlene, and 3 is with Martha. Let's do that in the Commons. The other facilitators, James, Jeff, and Lee, would you pair up with someone so that there's a facilitator and a note taker? And if you have a 4 or a 5, turn it into a 1, 2, or 3 and pick a group. Does that sound fair enough? Is that clear enough? Okay, great. Thank you. So 1 here, 2 there, 3 there, 4 or 5, pick a group.
At 12:40, we will come back into the sanctuary. We'll call you back in at 12:40. Okay, as we come back together, we'll recognizing that you probably didn't get to all of the questions, but thank you so much for your efforts, and if certainly these conversations will continue, not today, but in the weeks and days to come, around issues of how we are in covenant, how we hold accountability, and how we come back into covenant when it is broken. So as you gather together, I think we're getting everyone from, oh, there's Martha, good, thank you. Is your group in now, pretty much, Martha? Okay, so you've had some really engaged discussions, which I was observing as I moved around, and I'm sure Reverend Summer saw the same thing online. But if you'll just turn to your neighbor and just share an aha moment. In other words, what is one point or maybe a couple of points that stood out for you? But just turn to your neighbor and do that right now. And if you online will do that and perhaps share in the chat. All right, if you'll come back into the center right now, again. I know it's hard to interrupt your conversations when they're also rich. This past month, all of you online and here in this sanctuary have been engaged in conversations around covenant and its meaning. Its meaning for us individually, and its meaning for us as a religious community. Covenant making, says theologian Rebecca Parker, is our human response to a gift from a source larger than ourselves. And as Reverend Summer said in her homily for the service, covenant is how we, as members of our beloved faith, is how we respond to the call to remove the walls that block the beams of light from becoming one, so that we see the reflection of one another in each soul's eyes and know that we are interconnected, interdependent, and what harms you also harms me, and what makes you happy makes me happy too. That is practicing being one. Unity, interdependence, Unitarian Universalism at its finest. Today, I want all of you to, here in the sanctuary and online, know that Reverend Summer and I are grateful for your presence, for your engagement with this issue, and we are thankful to all those who made this time together possible. Reverend Mary, the tech team, and of course, all the wonderful facilitators of our small groups. Thank you indeed. And again, we are indeed one. Let us go into this day with love and peace in our hearts. And this has concluded our workshop, but Reverend Mary has some words for next steps.
Thank you, Carol. And so we return our gratitude to Reverend Summer and Reverend Carol. Thank you so much for creating this sacred space. You all want to clap? Yeah, let's clap. Thank you so much. And thanks to each of you for your engagement. Thank you to the facilitators who have stayed flexible this whole week and how this was going to happen. So for next steps, what will happen is I will gather the notes from the in-person and online discussions, and those notes will go to a writing team. There's a group of folks that includes Martha Nikoloff, Helen Henry, Janae Wolfram, and Rich Coleman. And they're going to take what you've discussed, what's in the current covenant, what's in our current mission, and draft some ideas and some statements for a behavioral covenant. And then that will go to the board next, and then come to the congregation for some further discussion. The idea is that that behavioral covenant will be added to our current covenant. The current covenant has wonderful words in it, and it's hard to know when we're in covenant or not with words that are abstract. And so some concrete behavioral statements are what we're looking for. So my hope would be that by, say, the end of January, we might have something to share with the board and the congregation, and then we'll begin some further conversation about a behavioral covenant. The next step after that is to create a healthy congregations team or a right relations team. And those groups exist in congregations to help the congregation live into the covenant in whatever way it's written, including a behavioral covenant. I know there's been some history here with that, and folks look at me like, oh, we're going to talk about conflict again. And right relations is about conflict sometimes, but mostly it's about building relationship. How do we listen? What do we do when we're disappointed? What do we do when we are joyous together and we're celebrating? And how do we do that? How do we be when things are going smoothly? And, how do we appreciate that and show gratitude to each other? So that's what I hope a healthy congregations team or a right relations team will help us with. So we'll look toward that in the summer. So that's the next steps. Again, I want to offer my gratitude, and you all know how to reach me, I hope. I'll stick around for a bit if you have any questions here in person, or for those online, thank you for being here, and please do reach out if there's anything that wasn't clear or you have questions about going forward. Thank you so much. Blessings on your day.